Me so well. Hello, George.
George?
We lost him.
Okay. No, he's there, but perhaps. Okay. So, Claudia,
Yeah.
I would like to have a discussion with you.
Yes, I know.
And the subject is we want to understand from the buyer's perspective. As we understand, there are, especially from Asian countries like China, India, and Mauritius, and all the ASEAN countries, there are hundreds and thousands of suppliers. And there's a general perception that a buyer looks only for the product and product related aspects, which of course is not true. Through your experience, can you bring on the table simple facts what all a Western buyer wants to know about a supplier? What are the gaps in buyer's understanding about a vendor or a supplier in different countries, especially in third world manufacturing? Can you please throw a light? What is buyer looking at?
Well, I must say we have to make a difference between the former buyers and I think the buyer after the pandemic. I think there will be a big difference because the fact that we have also a very important environmental problem and that we have to save the nature and the countries. A lot of people suddenly realize that the way we produced up to now cannot continue like this. And we saw all the problems in Bangladesh, in all these Asian countries when the pandemic started, and they were sitting with their garments and with all their productions, and no one wanted them to get transferred to Europe or to America. We have up to now, it was, I think it's a way when you have after the Second War, the big countries, let's say the US or Europe, they started to produce themselves in the beginning, and then they became very powerful. They earned a lot of money, so they had to find a place where they could produce in a low way. And so they went to other countries, and this is mainly, it was Asia, but it was also in the African countries. And the fact is that most of the buyers never thought about the social products. It only started after a while. And the problem was really that now we find out that on the one side, these countries could not develop in the same way as developed the Europeans or the Americans, because they had to calculate in a so small calculation that they couldn't develop anymore. But I think you asked me what will happen now. Now the buyer, I think when he comes back, he will certainly, also due to the power of the end buyer, the consumer, we have to be more transparent. We have to show more how the product is done, how it's produced, with which colors we use, because suddenly we realize that we have a lot of not very safe products. We have yarns who have been treated in the countryside with very bad systems, or we have colors who are not safe for the kids in the children's wear. So all these things has to be discussed. And in your former discussion with Gerrit, you discussed the fact already that it has to be traceable and tractable, and that it has to be followed up. And there is a new German law which will come out before the end of the year, telling you that all the big companies have to be able to be transparent from the first step in the business up to the end consumer. And this is a big problem. And I think that's why I think Mauritius is so in advance, because Mauritius is already keen about it. But a lot of other countries have not realized, because they don't get the news, that this law will not be only a German law, but it will also be a law accepted by the
Yeah.
whole European. In Brussels, they are already discussing about this law, and once Europe has done it,
Yeah, and
I'm sure
I can see myself, but
that
how it
I'm
seems
sure
better now.
that
It
in
seems
the
better now.
future it
Okay.
will also be a discussion with the United States. So what I today have to say is the new consumer, the new buyer will be asking for much more details in the social way and in the environment than in the real machine production. And this, everyone has to listen to it because it's really, this is a big change in the future.
Yeah, you highlighted that post-pandemic, the situation would be different, and the new buyer
Totally.
would be looking at much more than earlier in the new normal
Absolutely.
and the
Yeah.
new normal. So I come back to my basic question that in this present context,
Yeah.
what are the concerns of a buyer? Because they have to further sell it to their customer. So what are the concerns of the buyer in terms of selecting a supplier? And what are the challenges faced by buyer? Please throw some light
Yeah.
from the buyer perspective.
So if I'm a buyer and I come to a factory, I will for sure I will look how is done the product, if it's conform to the demand of my consumer. But I cannot only look if it's well knitted or it's well produced. I have to be able to, if my customer comes in a shop and he says, "Can you tell me how is done this factory? Is it clean? Do the people have a good salary? How they treat the people? Where comes the cotton from? Has the cotton been treated? The color? All these things have to be added to a control."
Yeah, I understand. You have obviously thrown some light on the new compliance requirement, and especially
It exists already, and for a lot of companies, they give already such compliance, but it will be for everyone. This is a
yeah,
big difference.
yeah. And you just mentioned that there's a new German supply
Law.
chain
Yeah,
act law which is going to be enforced, and
yeah.
probably the entire Europe or the most of the countries
They are already discussing it. Yeah.
do that. But I would like to say that besides regular operational details of a vendor like infrastructure, capacity, production efficiency, the compliance and transparency and sustainability, how would us buyer be easily be able to track or look into the suppliers?
I think they will send you, I will not say some spies, but I had this already in when I was consulting for WTO in Laos or in Romania, that companies send in sort of journalists or of people interested into control to produce, and in reality they are just controllers. They will control. There will be sudden visits of it isn't, will not be anymore that someone calls you and says, "I will come to your factory in 2 weeks." And then he comes for half a day, everything is keen, and then he goes away and the contract is done. I think they will come back, well, because they have forgotten something suddenly, and then it will be very interesting to see if the factory is still as clean as it was when the buyer came, or if there is a lot of mess, or if suddenly there are kids working in the factory. All these things will be controlled in a much severe way than before.
Yeah. Now, in general context,
Yeah,
you founded International Designer Network, I guess, in
yeah,
1995.
yeah.
Way,
Totally different subject. Yes.
way ahead. So, How do you help international designers
Well,
make
this
their
is
career?
a website everyone can go on,
Correct.
because in these years I was working with IAF, the International Apparel Association,
Yeah.
and I found out that exactly it was after the war. It was not really after the war. It was in the 1890s, and a lot of subcontractors in Asia, for example, or in Africa, uh, started to earn their own money. And in their countries, the people suddenly earned a little bit more money, and there was suddenly a middle class, which also happens the same thing what Gerrit said before in in Mauritius. You have suddenly a middle class, and this middle class wants to buy too, and then factories start to create their own line for their own people in the country. But who is doing this collection? Most of them, they have no designer. They don't know a designer. So at the time, I was a consultant for IAF, and when factories called, then it was sent to me, and I tried to help them to find a designer. And so we did it. We put it on this website where everyone can make a demand and find its designer by himself. It's a database, and the whole world can find a designer. Designers can inscribe for it's free. Same thing for the buyers. It's just, and we give information. But the idea is that countries, once they have first made the first step as factory, they will become a company with their own brand in its own country, because it will develop. And then they need designers, because I think it's not always the wife or the daughter who is able to make the collection.
True. Like small manufacturers, as just
Yeah.
mentioned, designers too generally do not have enough resources. Emerging designers or young designers do not have enough resources. How should
Well,
they manage to present themselves
well,
to
it's very
the
easy.
customer
If you
buyer?
go on the website, you can. If you go, the designers have. We did at the time. We did this questionnaire for the designers together with the British Garment Association, and we tested it with 100 designers around the world before we started. And we added a lot of questions. If a designer is correct and wants to give a real image of himself, he has to go through more than 150 questions. And the same thing, if a buyer wants to look after a designer, a company, they can put all the little questions inside, and at the end come out the name of the designer is the nearest to all the questions and all the demands. And I think this is, it will not be a young designer who comes out normally. But you have a lot of designers who have already who work since 20 years or more, and they have an experience and they have a knowledge, and sometimes they would like to do, besides their own job, something for the developing countries, something for smaller companies. It's also adventure. They like this. So there is a lot of opportunities for designers, but also for companies.
Yeah, and as I can see that you have worked with China industry for over 30 years now,
Yeah,
you
or
may
even
have
more.
seen,
I
you may have
started
seen 4 decades,
I
maybe.
I started in Singapore for
Yeah,
Kansai Yamamoto.
yeah,
We produced in Singapore in the 17th,
yeah.
and it was a time where China was not open. And then when China opened, I went into China, and I must say, China has done exactly the whole range of development of a normal company. In the beginning, they produced for others. They learned. They learned about machines. Learned about designers, about sales. Now, what are they doing? The Chinese buy factories in developing countries, and they do their own collections for their own people in China.
True.
And I think it's a perfect example for other countries to do the same. Not to stay only to be the one who is a supplier and the one who gets the order from maybe sometimes. In Laos, I found companies, they sold to Britain, and when we traced it, there were 20 intermediates. So how can the price be a good price for the producer? And this has to stop. Everyone has to be able to sell by himself.
Thank you.
You're
George,
welcome.
you have just entered. Do you have anything to ask Claudia, your old-time friend? George, are you there?
He disappeared.
Okay. So thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing all the experts' views and contribution.
Oh.
George, can you speak? George, can you listen? Can you hear now?
Professor George.
Okay. So I will, before taking the discussion with Manuela, I'll ask my technical team to play her video.